For the latest coronavirus-related information from our Lincoln University Cooperative Extension and Research COVID-19 Response Team, please visit http://bit.ly/LUCERCOVID19 or call the response team toll-free at 1-888-986-2990.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Today we are going to,
Good evening.
Good evening. Today we are going to present session A of the Home Garden Entrepreneurship Program. Sarah Eber is going to be our presenter today. She is a human nutrition and health program specialist, And my name is Eleazar Gonzalez. I work for Lincoln University Cooperative Extension. And I'm going to let you with Sarah now, so she can start her presentation of the topic today.
Hello again, everybody. I think hopefully you remember from last time that we were talking about harvesting your fruits and vegetables. So today we're going to take that next step and talk about post-harvest management. So basically these are the kind of things we're hoping you'll get out of this today. And we're going to talk a little bit quickly to review some food safety guidelines and a real quick review of seed saving techniques, because that is sort of post-harvest. You did hear about that in the previous webinars. I'm just going to go through it very quickly to keep it in your head so you don't forget to save your seeds. And I got a fun seed saving story for you. Time, temperature, and humidity needs for fresh fruits and vegetables, some basic techniques for preserving produce, and additional resources for some advanced food safety and food preservation training for you all. Because it's a lot to do in a 30-minute webinar. Okay, so these are the Food Safety Modernization Act, referred to as FSMA, is a program that is specifically regulated that talks about foods and produce safety. And it's run by the Produce Safety Alliance through Cornell University. And I have been told that the Missouri Department of Agriculture is offering that program for $20 that you can access that. So if you're thinking about selling your produce, you probably would, it might not be a bad idea to take it. Some really good information, and it's very well done, and they have them online. So that's cool. Okay, just a quick word about food safety. Don't forget to wash your hands. And anytime you've used equipment to grow with, you don't necessarily want to use that equipment to harvest with, or you want to make sure you've cleaned and sanitized it before you use it to harvest your fresh fruits and vegetables. You do want to wear gloves if you have any open wounds so you don't contaminate your produce. And you don't want to use non-composted animal manure on your garden, because that poses a whole other set of food safety risks. And you want to be very careful with your compost and farm animal placement so that you don't get any you-know-what on the produce. Another quick word about food safety. In terms of refrigeration, anytime you have prepared food, so I'm talking about if you took, say you've got blackberries growing and you got some fresh nectarines and you chopped up the nectarine, you washed them all really good and you chopped up the nectarines and tossed them with the blackberries and put them in the refrigerator. You'd want to try, if your refrigerator was running a little on the warm side at 45 degrees, 3 or 4 days is about how long you're going to want to keep them before they'll start kind of growing things you can't see. And then 7 days at 41 degrees. If your refrigerator runs colder, they'll usually keep for like 7 days. And then for a longer storage, if you're not going to be able to eat things right away, you want to consider freezing, canning, or drying, and we'll talk about some of those things a little bit later. A couple other quick harvest produce safety notes. Make sure you check your water source. If you're using a city water source, you should be fine. You can ask them if you want to see their safety tests. They are required to run those. If you're using well water, you may want to have your well water checked to make sure it's not been contaminated. And if you're using pond water, you definitely want to check to make sure that it's nice and clean and you're not putting anything in there. I mean, pond water feeds or provides water for wildlife, that's fine, but sometimes it can carry some bacteria that could contaminate your produce. make sure you're using safe handling practices, washing your hands, or you have gloves on if you have open wounds. And be very careful to try to keep birds and wildlife and the dogs and the cats and the chickens and the goats out of your produce bed so that you don't find things you don't want on your fresh produce. Technically, according to the regulations, you cannot sell fresh produce that has that E word. That's another word for poop or feces. You can use whatever you want, but if those kind of things are on your produce by law, you're not allowed to sell them. So just kind of be a couple of things to be sure you're aware of as we move through this series. And so let's jump right in to talking about post-harvest production basics. And again, quickly, we're going to go over a little bit about the seeds, but I thought it might be fun to show you some pictures of some pressure canners. These were in the 50s, and this is what we used to, and we used to can fruits and vegetables at home. And this is also one of the reasons cooperative extension agents used to go to people's homes, because we were having such an outbreak of foodborne illness with home canned goods, because a lot of people weren't processing them to the point that they wouldn't cause foodborne illness. And I thought you just might get a kick out of the donut. That would be a joke. Did anybody catch that? Look at the package on the seed container. Okay, enough. Everybody wake up, that was supposed to be a joke. Okay, moving on. So a quick review of your heirloom and your hybrid seeds, okay? And the reason I bring this up is because as you save seeds, you wanna know whether you're taking them from an heirloom plant or a hybrid plant, because if you save them appropriately and you plant them next year, you don't necessarily want to be unpleasantly surprised when your hybrid seeds don't give you the exact same fruit they gave you the year before. They'll look different, they'll be kind of fun and tasty, but they won't be exactly the same fruit or vegetable. And this is just a quick example of some heirloom varieties. And I think from last week, if you remember, we were looking at some red salad bowl lettuce that I was growing, which is actually a hybrid. And there's, and usually when you buy your seed, they'll definitely tell you if it's heirloom or hybrid. And I think I called this a hybrid. This is an heirloom, sorry. These are heirloom seeds, and if you collect the seeds, they will give you this same plant back next year. If you are interested in saving your carrot seeds, be sure to ask us a few questions. Carrot seeds are biannuals, and they require a little different method of harvesting, and the references are also available for you at the end of the presentation. Hybrid seeds, this is just a few fun ones. I think we were looking when, last week when I showed you the video of my raised bed, we were looking at a Waltham black seed, and that was an heirloom. This particular hybrid, Green Frills, actually uses that plant that I showed you last week, and blends it with another plant to get this one. So the hybrid seeds, you're not going to get these exact same plants back. They'll be good. They'll breed back more to the parent plant, just so you're aware. And directly from your garden entrepreneurship guide, when it's completed, this is a facsimile of table 6. So it's just a nice summary table for you to put it all kind of in one place in terms of these kind of common crops and how they like to be kept, whether it's refrigerate to eat soon or to put up for a longer period of time. So we'll step straight into preserving your food post-harvest. And I'm separating them out a little bit because these foods, they have different needs, just like children and plants do. They have different needs post-harvest. So to talk about lettuce and anything very leafy, things are gonna need a little bit different. Lettuces and greens prefer a low humidity, and I was looking through a lot of the extension resources on this, and there definitely was some inconsistency. And so what I'm also sharing this with you from my knowledge as a dietitian and a nutritionist, that they typically do prefer a low humidity in the refrigerator. And one of the little tricks is that if you get an airtight container, even if you use bagged lettuce or spinach, If you pull it out and rinse it really good, and I always recommend, if you haven't invested in one of these already, to get something called a salad spinner. They're usually fairly inexpensive at like the Walmart. And when you harvest your greens, they usually come with like a basket, and you can spray them really well and clean them off really well 2 or 3 times. But then you put them in the salad spinner and spin it, and it pulls all the excess water away. And then you can even pat it dry if you want to a little bit with paper towel. But the secret to keeping them in the refrigerator for like a week or 2 is you can actually get an airtight container and put paper towel in the bowl, and then put the lettuce and the spinach or whatever you're using in there, and then put the paper towel over the top and seal it, and it'll keep very easily for 1 to 2 weeks in your refrigerator without getting all slimy. And typically, don't forget, especially with lettuce, that you want to tear it and not cut it. If you cut it, it will bruise worse, and it will actually go bad faster. Broccoli and cauliflower are pretty resilient in the refrigerator and the freezer. They typically will refrigerate for 1 to 2 weeks, and they also prefer kind of a lower humidity. And they are very freezable. Now, lettuce doesn't freeze well, spinach can, but broccoli and cauliflower both freeze pretty well. Onions and potatoes, if you recall from our last session, we talked about when you're going to harvest them, that you want to pull them out and put them in kind of like a warm, dry place out of the sun for about a week to sort of let them cure. And that will kind of, you can dust all the dirt off of them. And then after that, then you can bring them in the house. And they do prefer a little lower humidity. Remember not to refrigerate your potatoes. They can grow a fungus in the refrigerator. Onions, not so much, but potatoes can. You want to try to store them in a cool place with what we'd call moderate humidity, which is about 50 to 60%. That's usually fairly comfortable for most of us humans. And they'll keep for 2 to 8 months, depending on the circulation, the air circulation, where you keep them, and just keep them out of the sun. I know I found a little inexpensive, it looked like an old-fashioned food bin at, believe it or not, Hobby Lobby. And it was a perfect size because it had like a wire basket that fit, and you could put those things in there. Potatoes can actually can pretty well. They don't freeze well. They're not bad in the freezer, but they do change texture and can get kind of mealy and fall apart. Onions freeze well, but they really don't can very well. Carrots and radishes and celery. Now, best bet here is to wash the roots and trim them. And you can keep these in this form. They're kind of fresh cut form for anywhere from 2 to 4 months. My favorite thing to do with carrots and celery is to clean them and cut them into sticks and put them in water. And they'll keep for a good week in cold water, nice and crisp. And it makes it really easy to make sure you get plenty of vegetables on your plate, because all you got to do is go in and grab them and pop them on your plate. They do prefer the higher humidity, even if you're not going to keep them in the water to eat right away. They will keep for sometimes 2 to 4 months. Now, carrots can pretty well, and they freeze well. Celery doesn't freeze well, and neither do radishes. You can certainly try it, but they're going to give you kind of a watery, soft fruit. And honestly, if you had excess celery, that's not, if you chopped it up and froze it, it wouldn't be bad in a soup or stew. It would still give you a nice flavor. But they will, carrots particularly, will freeze 6 to 8 months up to a year. Zucchini and summer squash, don't forget, famous date, August 8th. Leave the zucchini on your neighbor's porch. I think some of our neighbors here at Lincoln are already leaving zucchini on our porch as it is, so it must be a good year for a zucchini crop. I think I understood there was an entire box left in our Allen Hall yesterday. Anyway, zucchini and summer squash. You know, I've done a little study on zucchini and summer squash, trying to figure out the real differences between them. And there seems to be some flavor differences, but they are really very genetically almost identical plants, and they've just come out a little bit different. They do prefer a little lower humidity refrigeration for 1 to 2 weeks, depending on the humidity at room temperature. And you can leave zucchini and squash out, you know, really and truly for about a week or so, depending on how humid your house is. at room temperature. But if you're going to need to keep them a little longer, you want to put them in the refrigerator. You can freeze both of these vegetables. They will have texture changes, and we'll talk a little bit more about a quick freezing technique in a little bit. Now, I have noticed when you grate, and certainly this is not a bad place to share if you have some other grated zucchini stories, but very often you don't necessarily have to process grated zucchini. You can grate it and put it in a baggie and pop it straight in the freezer, and it will do just fine. Tomatoes, everyone's perennial favorite, and it stores beautifully. But you do want to try to store it at room temperature at least until it's ripe. If you put the refrigerator, and this is a review from last time, did everybody remember what happens to a tomato if you put it in the refrigerator and it's not ripe? Anyone? Anyone? Anybody remember? Okay, everybody's quiet. What happens is you won't necessarily have that nice sweet flavor, and it can get kind of grainy. So wait until it's ripe and then refrigerate it. And then it'll keep, after it's ripened, for 4 to 10 days in the low humidity side of your refrigerator. They can, and they freeze, and they dry, and they eat just about any way. Tomatoes are oh so versatile. Peppers are also really similar to that. You can really keep them at room temperature for about a week, as long as it's not terribly dry at your home. Store them in the warm part of the refrigerator for up to 2 to 3 weeks. And again, they kind of prefer that lower humidity, and they do freeze pretty decently. The texture is going to change, but they will freeze well, and then they'll saute right back up or go well in a soup or a stew. Watermelon and cantaloupe are, always everyone's favorite. And these are unfortunately some fruits that don't necessarily preserve as well, especially watermelon. Now, I will tell you that my favorite way to preserve a little bit of watermelon is I like to get like a melon baller and make little balls and freeze those, and then use them like in a drink to give it a little bit of flavor or to flavor a punch or something like that. But it really does go just straight back to pulp when you thaw it back out. Cantaloupe will freeze a little bit better, but as far as keeping them, you really can leave them out in a cool room for 3 or 4 days at a relatively high humidity, but then refrigerate them at a lower humidity to preserve them a little longer in the refrigerator. And freezing definitely alters the texture of both of them. But same thing with the cantaloupe. If you use a little melon baller or cut it in chunks, it actually goes pretty nicely with some frozen berries, and actually really nicely in the middle of the winter. It just tastes really good, especially nice fresh cantaloupes, nice and sweet. Pumpkin and winter squashes are preserved really well, and they store forever. You can store them at room temperature in a cool place with moderate humidity whole. Once they're processed, you can refrigerate them up to about a week at a low humidity. And when I say processed, I mean if you remove the outer shell and chop them or puree them. That's when we're talking. That's what I mean processed. But you can leave them sitting out whole for quite a while a lot of times. But if you recall from our talk last time, the longer you leave them out, you'll lose. It'll dry a little bit, and so you won't have as much pulp from the center. They freeze well, and they can really well as too. And then I put a few slides in here about berries, because who doesn't love the berries, at least in some way, shape, or form. And I only put a few up here. There's all kinds of really fun berries, and some that grow on some really good native bushes that are pretty tasty too. You definitely, with berries, you leave them out and eat them quick. And if you can't eat them quickly, then you would want to refrigerate them after they ripen, but they'll only keep for 2 or 3 days. So I know one of my favorite things to do is to catch the blueberry people this time of the year, and then just bring the blueberries home and freeze them straight away. And there is nothing better than fresh blueberries in the middle of the wintertime. And they do prefer a higher humidity, and they do dry pretty well. Pretty versatile, all things considered. And I included a little bit in here about stone fruit. That is apples and peaches and pears and plums. Because a lot of those do grow pretty well here in Missouri. I think The Missouri peach crop did not do as well this year because of the late frost, and I think that even the nectarines took it a little hard. But these two, you'll want to keep at room temperature until they're ripened, but they will refrigerate. And they get a little bit different. Well, apples can keep for 4 to 6 months in a cool, dry place. And I'll tell you all, I have a golden delicious type variety that is still in my basement. And of course, he's kind of wrinkly, but I can still chop him up and make him into a pie from last fall. So apples are pretty cool if you keep your humidity and the temperature just right and away from direct light. Pretty resilient. Some of the varieties can do that. And then refrigerate, ideal. They do prefer a higher humidity in the refrigerator, and they freeze well and they dry well. So does anyone have any questions? Can anybody see anything in the chat before we move into some methods of food preservation?
Yes, take watermelon, for example. If you liquidize it to make a juice out of it, how long does it stay? Does it stay any longer than a fresh?
I still probably wouldn't keep it in my refrigerator longer than 7 days as a juice, but you do bring up a good point, because I've done this too. You know, you blend up the watermelon and put it in ice cube trays. Well, you can keep that in the freezer, and it's just going to it's just going to be like watermelon ice. And so you can definitely, that might be really good, like in like a sparkling water or something in the middle of the winter time. You could use that. You could use the watermelon, blend it with something that might be kind of tasty.
Then I had a question earlier on the vegetables, the carrots. I think you said you can put the carrots in water and leave in water. Don't they lose some vitamins if you leave them long in water?
Usually the vitamins that carrots give you are vitamin A, and those are fat soluble. So they are not going to come out in the water. You can lose a few of the B vitamins, but they really don't leach out very badly. And that's why I don't usually keep them longer than about a week. You cut them up and slice them and put them in the refrigerator in a little water. They crisp up really nice, and you'll still get plenty of vitamin A.
Okay, thank you.
Let's keep going with the presentation. Then at the end,
Okay. So your basic methods of food preservation are refrigeration, general cool storage, freezing, canning, and drying. And we've talked a little bit about the refrigeration and some of the cool storage. And I wanted to share with you, this was actually a picture taken by one of our own Lincoln University Extension specialist, Cheryl Maxwell, down the boot heel. And the other thing I'll mention to you, if anyone of you are interested in this, I do have a fact sheet that's almost through printing, if you can believe it, that talks about some freezing and blanching times for fresh fruits and vegetables. And it basically is just kind of like that table we saw earlier in the presentation from the guide. This is just a fact sheet to go along with fruits and vegetables, so you have a quick handy reference. Blanching, almost all fruits and vegetables will require some blanching before you freeze them. The purpose of the blanching is to stop the enzymatic ripening. If you choose not to blanch, that your vegetables will still taste pretty good, but you're liable to get a lot soggier, less palatable product when it thaws. So most generally, almost every fruit and vegetable should be blanched, and that is simply submersing it in rolling boiling water for a given period of time based on whatever fruit and vegetable it is, and then you immediately pull it out and put it in an ice bath, which keeps it from overcooking. And then depending on the fruit and vegetable, you can freeze it. And what Miss Maxwell is showing you here in these pictures is she's taken some broccoli and she's chopped the stem part off, the more tender part of the stem, and she's cut them in some uniform. You'll notice the sizes are about the same. And then this is just the flower head. And so what she did was popped these in the water for about 30 seconds to a minute, and then popped the flower heads in the water to blanch, and then pulled them all out, popped them in the ice bath, and put them on a cookie sheet with some paper towel and put them in the freezer. And she did it just long enough to freeze them. Look how pretty those are. And then popped them in bags. And so the trick here, you could bag them together. I mean, the Jolly Green Giant does it with his. You could certainly do it with yours. She separated hers and with the intention of course, cooking these off later in the winter. And then these she's going to throw into soups and stews. And because in a soup and a stew, they'll still give you the flavor. They have just as much vitamin A as the flower head, and they'll just cook right in like cabbage might into your a really yummy soup or stew in the middle of the winter. The other method of food preservation, and this is canning is kind of a lost art. And I don't know how many of you, if you know how to use the little reaction button on your Zoom, you could react and raise your hand if you've ever done any of the old time canning. And there's a lot of really good data about how to do this. This is something you do want to be really careful with, because the pressure canners can be very dangerous. And I want to also mention that if you have some other questions or you're interested in some classes about this, we can talk about it offline. I will tell you that the University of Missouri is offering a home canning class online, and they're charging, I think, $30 for it. So if you, I think I put the link on there at the end of the session. And if there's interest, well, I'd just talk with Dr. Gonzalez and we can see if we can put something together here at Lincoln later, because that's a whole nother set of workshops. But pressure canners can be very dangerous if they're not handled properly. Pressurized saucepans really are not appropriate for canning for preservation. Safety and sanitation issues are key to successful canning. The pressure and the heat combine to kill microorganisms that can make us all very sick. I mean, anything from salmonella to botulism, you want to be very careful with that. The lid rings, that's these guys right here. Those can be reused if they're cleaned and sanitized appropriately and stored appropriately. But the actual lid, and if you're not aware, most of these lids nowadays, when you buy them, have like a rubber gasket that's like stuck to the underneath side of the lid. And so like what I always do is I put that in some hot water so it's soft, and then put it on top of my can and put the ring down. But those are only usable, those are really only supposed to be used one time, because they're a thin layer of rubber. They actually seal your can, but when you undo the seal, that rubber has already been broken down from all that heating. So it is not going to maintain a seal. I know people who do reuse them and they have no trouble, but I would not recommend it, because all it takes is one bad can to make you sick. It's not worth it. And I mentioned this because I think this was here by popular demand from the team, because this is also one of our favorite canned foods. And so I did 2 small batches of strawberry jam. You can tell this is 2018. These are all gone, by the way, but I love to do these and give them out if I have a good crop. We had a really great crop of blackberries one year, and so everybody got blackberry jam at home and some English muffins, because they're not canners, so they don't get that good fresh jelly. So I thought I would mention that. And let's talk just a minute about drying. Drying is really an age-old way to preserve food, and it works really, really well. It can be as easy or expensive as you want it to be. You can use your oven, you can use the sun, or you can purchase a dehydrator. Let your needs guide you. And these pictures these are some oven dried tomatoes, and these are some sun dried chilies. And this particular food dehydrator is from Home Depot for, I think, about $40. So, you can do it any way you want. When you use the sun to dry your vegetables, you want to kind of cover them so you don't get them full of pests, some things like that. But you can do a lot of different things with drying. Most vegetables will dry pretty decently, and a lot of fruits dry nicely in the dehydrator as well. Okay, so if you have any questions or would like some more information on food safety, you can contact any of us here at Lincoln University. And there's a few other websites, and I would definitely recommend the PSA Grower Training course. A lot of places offer it besides just Cornell, so there's other places you can access that. And I wanted to talk just a quick minute about the Culinary Incubator Program here at LU, and that will be up and coming, and I can read you some information about it. But if you are interested, and Dr. Gonzalez will talk lots and lots more next session about marketing and working through your produce for sale, etc. next time. So we're looking forward to that. But the Culinary Incubator Program is set to start up in the fall, and it is specifically designed to help small farmers and small growers have a commercial kitchen that they can utilize to process their produce. Now, if you just have extra produce and want to sell it, make sure there's no leftovers from the pets or any farm animals or birds, but you can sell it at the farmer's market whole with no real issues. If you want to do any processing beyond that, there's a lot of regulations and a lot of other things, and the Culinary Incubator program is specifically set up to help you work through that, obtain those certifications, and gives you access to the commercial kitchen here at LU at a really, really reasonable price. There's not a lot of commercial kitchens for people who want to do things, say like sauerkraut or make their own jellies to sell. So if you have more questions, talk with us offline, and we can share some more information with you on that. And so this slide presentation also has a bunch of references. Any questions?
Sarah, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
About how do you count potatoes?
How do I count potatoes?
Yes.
You mean
You
like
said,
put up or harvest, you mean? Or to like
so
preserve?
you just can them without being cooked, or you cook them before?
You mean blanching?
No, I just never hear about canning potatoes. I was just wondering.
With canning potatoes, because they cook for so long, you don't have to blanch them. Some people will blanch them and take a lot of the skin off because that'll make the skin peel off well. Potatoes are and let me think a minute. Let me make sure I review my file up there. But potatoes may be just about the only tuber you don't have to, the only bulb you don't need to blanch because of the nature of its slow ripening process anyway. If it's in a controlled temperature, and after you're going to put it 10 minutes in a hot water bath under pressure, you're going to kill all the bacteria as long as you've washed it, really thoroughly. Of course, you want to do that with all of your produce as well. Now, if you're going to freeze it, you may want to go ahead and blanch a little bit very quickly, especially the starchier varieties of potatoes like red potatoes and Yukon Golds. A little quick blanch may help them preserve a little bit better, and they may not go as grainy. Russet potatoes are just the nature of the russet. They will get grainy pretty quickly if you freeze them. And they actually get they're even a little grainy when you can them too. So.
Right, thank you.
You are welcome.
I have a question on something you didn't cover in rhubarb. Can you say something in terms of how long it takes to grow and how you'd process it?
Okay, yeah, we didn't add that. That is kind of a popular Missouri crop. So do we have anybody, can we see by a show of hands, anyone who's got a nice pile of rhubarb in their backyard? Anybody put their hand up?
I have one plant in a pot which I carried over from last season because somebody told me it needs 2 years to grow. You can't eat it in the first year.
That's right, and that's what I would tell you is after you get it started, you you want to give it a good year and let it double, because it will. You want to give it a nice spot. It's a nice loamy soil so it can expand itself and multiply so that you get more than one stalk. Because if you like rhubarb, one stalk just won't be enough. But it is, then I would also recommend with that, when you bring it in, I would do a quick blanch, and even for 30 seconds to a minute, and then pull it back out, and then let it, and I would do exactly the same thing. If you wanted to freeze it, I use exactly that same sheet pan, and you can use parchment paper if you're afraid your vegetables will stick to it. Sometimes things like tomatoes will stick. Or the paper towel and pop it in the freezer till it freezes good, and then throw it in a Ziploc bag and reuse it. So you could chop it up that way, or you could try to freeze it whole. When it thaws, rhubarb is going to be pretty soft. So you're going to want to either add it to a soup or a stew, or in a pie. And then I thought of something else that made me think of something. The one thing I didn't mention is if you really want to, and this you can do this. I've done this too, mostly because I'm lazy. But have a lot of cherry tomatoes that make it through and you just can't possibly eat another one. I've washed them off really good and not blanched them and thrown them straight in the freezer. Keep in mind that when you freeze tomatoes, their texture is not gonna be anything like what they were when you put them in. They're gonna do better to be sauteed or stewed or something But those cherry tomatoes are kind of fun to just pull them out and throw them in the stew, and they give you some freshness. I personally don't mind the skin. You know why? I'm the dietitian. I'm going to eat the skin. But a lot of people like to blanch, and you can blanch the baby, the cherry tomatoes or the grape tomatoes and peel the skin off those too if you want to. And a lot of people will do that, blanch their tomatoes and peel the skin off. I'm A, lazy, and B, no, the skin's got a lot of lycopene in it, so I skip that step and put up with the skin.
There is another question in the chat.
No questions in the chat?
There is one here. It's from Elaine. And she wants to know, like she introduced, with the frozen berries, as in strawberry or blackberry specifically, would you prefer sugar syrup, or does this pair well without sugar syrup and plain?
Actually, you can. There's 3 different methods to, let me think if I can demonstrate this to you. Hold on a second. Let's see. Let me see how quickly I can pull this up for you. Yeah, there we go. Oh, here we go. This is, okay, so you all are seeing, keep in mind that this is a draft version. Oh, okay, of this, and it's got another revision coming, but I will show you this quickly, and because we do talk about that. I personally am not a person that likes to use a sugar set, and that is because I'm not into the sugar, but you can use different syrup packs if you want to. Let's see, where does that go? Okay, but berries actually dry pack really well. Berries dry pack really well. And this is another Lincoln University extension fact sheet for you. But you can certainly do that. You want to consider for freezing fruit, you do a lot of times with the fruit when you freeze it, you want to add ascorbic acid or citric acid or lemon juice to the fruit to preserve the texture and color before you freeze it. You don't have to do that with berries necessarily. And there are some methods to use different amounts of sugar, whether you want a light syrup pack or a heavy syrup pack. And a lot of places really like to do that because they feel like it preserves the fruit crispness a little bit better. So you certainly could do that. And there are some guidelines and along with this fact sheet. So Elaine, make sure Dr. Gonzalez has your email address. And as soon as we have that done to completed publishing, which should be the 1st of next week, I'm happy to share that with you, and the references actually are included there to let you find good methods and the actual precise ways to do a light syrup or a heavy syrup pack. Does that kind of answer your question? You can use that to freeze or can too, by the way, a light syrup pack or a heavy syrup pack. And you just put it in a little Ziploc baggie or a freezer safe container and thaw it a little bit and pop it out and make a pie. But you don't necessarily have to do that with berries. So, any other questions?
Yes, my question is linked from harvesting. When you look at things like cabbage or cauliflower or broccoli, is there a way you can know how much leaves you can harvest before the head comes, so that it doesn't affect the head? I don't know here, do you eat the leaves of cauliflower or broccoli before the head? Do you get my question?
Yes, the leaves of the broccoli and cauliflower are completely edible and minimal phytates in them.
They're what? Sorry, I didn't get what you said.
Minimal phytates. They don't have a lot of chemicals in them that bind to things, no more than like leafy green vegetables, and they're sweet, they're delicious, they're wonderful. I would not recommend harvesting the leaves until you do the head. And if you remember from our harvest, we talked about the right time to cut the head, and that if you cut it soon enough and let the plant grow, that you'll get little more flowerets off. And that's when I like to take the leaves and put them with the little flowerets, because they saute so nicely. And if you can't, the thing with the leaves for the big flower head is they provide some protection. So you want to kind of leave those on there. And then the little ones that pop off after that, you definitely can harvest and eat those for sure. And you could eat the big leaf, but I would leave it to kind of protect the plant. And with cabbage, that's really up to you. You know, when you pull it off of there, a lot of people take the outer leaves off, especially if there's some insect damage. And for those of us who don't use any sprays or anything on there, I'm very happy to share the outer 3 or 4 sets of leaves with an insect and get a nice clean, fresh head of cabbage. So you get to keep that however you want. You know, that if it's bruised or torn, then it's definitely not going to be as good a quality. It's not going to can and freeze as well. So you want to keep that in mind with the cabbage head. Does that answer your question okay?
Sort of, not really, but maybe situations differ, because I know definitely at home cabbages, before they form the head, they have a way of eating some of the leaves. But you know, back home it's not done scientifically, where you are told how many leaves or how. Oh,
I don't think there's a method to your cabbage. You could eat all the leaves if you wanted to.
But
and cabbage, you could take the leaves off if you like to too. You know, I don't think there's any harm in that. And it's not going to change the nutrition significantly. So you can harvest the leaves whenever you want on cabbage. I just have a tendency to not use those outer leaves because it has a tendency to, as you might remember, Dr. Coates-Mensah talked about trap cropping. And one of the things is, believe it or not, you know, if you got some excess leaves, the bugs hit, they kind of work on the leaves because they're easy to get to there. So they don't attack the heads.
I post in the chat the survey for the post evaluation. If you have a chance, you can start answering.
I have a question. Can I ask something real quickly?
Well, sure.
Fair enough. Okay. I want to know, like, for example, I put watermelon, plants, and maybe I didn't distance them as much as I should have. The watermelon plants are not like the tomatoes that you hold it up, right? I mean, you let them grow on the ground.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, I have known some people that have tried to trellis their watermelon. The trick is, and I wish I could remember where I saw that picture. It was ingenious. And I want to say it was South America. I can't remember now. But I saw a picture where they actually were, I think they were actually researching to see if they could pull it off, but they were letting their squash and their cantaloupe, and you can do this with especially a watermelon. You know, the great big ones, this probably would be really hard, but the littler ones, you know, you could probably try this. What they actually did was they grew them up the side of the fence, and they made a little sling, you know, so as soon as the plant started putting on the fruit, they just loosened the sling so it wouldn't grow into the fruit, and held it up so that the plant would grow up off the ground. And it did reduce their bugs. I thought it was pretty cool. I don't know if I have the energy for that, but you could do that. But no, watermelon, you do leave those on the ground because the fruit will get so heavy, it'll tear up the vine before it's mature. Does that answer your question?
I'm sorry, I was mute. I didn't realize. This is the thing, I'm noticing it, and I'm not sure if it's bad or not. You know, like those things that grow, you know, that are like, I don't know. You know, the little things that grow, they look like those little anthens.
Yeah, little tendrils.
Yes,
yeah,
that's a great name for it. But anyways, they're kind of attaching to each other from one plant to another, and I wonder if that's bad.
I don't think it's going to be a problem. Does anybody else on the team have a comment about watermelon tendrils? I think you're okay.
Okay. And another thing I wonder, like I have like, you know, peppers are coming up, and I wonder, how do you know when, because I mean, it looks firm, the color looks great, but it's not very big. And I wonder, should I leave it to see if it grows more? How do I know? I know last week you were talking about, you know, how to look at how many days to, you know, the time when the fruit, but I did not do that. Then I lost count of the dates. Then I need to go by something else. And like, for example, tomatoes, I see one that is orange, and it's small. And I wonder if this, you know, breed, it's supposed to be like that or not. I wonder, can I take pictures and send it to you all? And maybe you can help me out. I don't know, you know.
Sure. Do you know what kind of, first of all, do you know what kind of tomato plant it is, or where did you get it from?
Nadia gave it to me, then I don't know.
Okay, that's in
Some heirlooms. They're heirlooms.
They're heirlooms?
Yeah, but I had a Honey Delight.
It's like the first one you
Cherokee
get.
Purple.
Like Honey Delight? That's what it kind of sounds like. I know if you got them, if you got any plants via Dr. Nadia or Dr. Gonzalez from me, I can tell you once the fruit comes on what they are. In terms of your peppers, here's what I usually do. So like, are you having like a green pepper, or is it like a chili pepper?
Okay, I have ones that are those long, I think they're chili peppers and they're green. I guess I need to wait until they become red, right, on those. And then I have like the green bell peppers, and it's a small one, but I mean, the skin is firm, the color is beautiful green, and it's not very big. And I wonder, when am I supposed to take it off, you know, from here?
Okay, two things that I always do when I look at my peppers. When you go ahead and you're gonna play with your pepper, sister. Get a hold of the pepper and feel if you can kind of tell if it's super firm and the skin, and it feels really like if you push on it a little bit, does it give or does it not give? And then the other thing I kind of look at is the bottom. Sometimes as a pepper matures, you can almost see like little feet or like little legs. It's hard to little points at the bottom, because the pepper is growing out and getting bigger and getting to full maturity. So if you push on it and it has a little bit of give, then that means there's a hollow space in between and it's probably mature and ready to go. If it's still really, really super firm, then that means everything's in there is really thick and it's probably gonna get a little bigger for you.
Okay. And I mean, if I let it go a little more, what can I see that, oh my gosh, this is not good, I need to take it out? I mean, if it
starts to turn colors, then harvest it. It'll still be fine. It'll be a long time before you get an oh my gosh pepper.
All right. I mean, this is the first time for me, then everything is a wonder, you know?
Yeah, no, it's so much fun. You can't hardly goof up a pepper. The only way you're gonna goof up a pepper is when it frosts on it. Then it's gonna make it all soft. We got a ways to go, I think, before that.
All right. Thank you.
You are welcome. Anytime.
Sarah?
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to tell Packy that if she wants to know what tomatoes she has, she can send me photos. We have done it before.
Yeah, yep. I will do that.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely send pictures. And like I was saying, if you, Dr. Gonzalez and Dr. Nadia, if you know that you gave them my tomatoes, let me know and I'll pull. Let me have them send the pictures and I can tell you what the varieties were.
Your tomatoes went with Eleazar.
Okay.
Okay.
And if I could add one point about tomatoes, correct me if I'm wrong, but tomatoes, they start green and they get to the size they're going to be mostly before they start to ripen. So I don't usually have tomatoes that once the fruit is set, they're green, they turn red and then they get big. You know what I mean? Like they get to the size about they're going to be and then they ripen from there. So if your tomato is already turning orange, I wouldn't expect it to get a whole lot larger. It's probably a variety that maybe is a little smaller. Just watch for ripeness and don't let it get, cracked or rotten. Sarah's pointed out a couple of things, like if it gets rained on or those kinds of things, it can perhaps crack the fruit, or you can get insect damage. So, just kind of keep an eye on it. If it's already starting to turn orange, it's probably in the process of ripening.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Amy. You're right. Thank you very much. And just as Amy said, if it's starting to ripen, I mean, it's one thing if we get one of these crazy downpours that lasted like 2 seconds, but if we're going to get a rain, you really could go out and bring it in and put it on your countertop and it'll finish ripening, especially once it starts turning colors. If it rains, if it's getting like that and it rains, we get quite a bit of water. Sometimes the tomatoes, and you know, if it was me and this is your first set of plants, you might see if your tomato, that particular heirloom may be very resistant to that, and it might be fine. But that would be something you definitely keep an eye on if it rains a lot, and see if they split.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
One of the things I have a question about, I mean, once the plants are done producing, and a good example is my strawberry plants have stopped, do I just not really maintain them, water them, and things like that? Do I cut them back, or what do I do with those plants? I mean, we've still got a lot of sunlight and stuff. I'm just not really sure what to do with my strawberry plant.
I keep watering them a little bit, and you don't have to fertilize them so much, but this is the time when the strawberry plant particularly is going to start to spread itself. So you want to let it kind of be, because this is how you go from strawberries to strawberries, you know? And so if you get in there and mess with it too much, you're liable to upset the runners that it's going to start to send out and reproduce itself. So, you know, just throw, we go 2 weeks, we go more than a week without water, a week and a half, put a little water, but I wouldn't waste a lot of water on the strawberry plant, because it's used to this. This is part of its cycle. You know, it does well, it does its spring thing, and then it lives through the hot summer and does what it needs to do. If it's not much water, it'll wait a little while till it starts to get some more water before it puts a runner out. So the strawberries are pretty low maintenance. The thing that always annoyed me with strawberries, and this is the hard part, is keep them weeded so that you don't have to deal with a bunch of weeds and weed seeds next spring, so that your bed is ready to prepare and you can get those nice strawberries and you're not fighting a bunch of weed seeds.
Okay.
Can strawberries have like, I don't know, I have a plant that is a strawberry, and I have it in a big pot. And you know, I saw one coming out, and it was beautiful. It was so red, but just the end of it wasn't quite there. Then I went the next day and it was gone. And I have, like, you know, chicken, whatever around, you know, the thing. And I wonder if there is anything within the plant that can get rid of a strawberry, or do you think it's an animal that somehow?
Probably an animal.
No bueno, mucha caca. I think I'm going to bring it up to my balcony, so I'm excited about the strawberry.
Could be a neighbor. It could be a neighbor still want to.
No bueno.
There is more questions? There is something in the chat. Let me check.
Don't forget to fill out your survey, everybody. Another plug for your survey.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
I hope that was helpful.
If there are no more questions for Sarah, we want to thank you for assisting to this webinar, and we are looking forward for last session for this complete webinar. We are looking to provide a certification for the training, so that will help you to grow some of your background experience too, and document it in one way.